This message, direct from World Dairy Expo, has been brought to you by Your Beef Checkoff. For more information about how Your Beef Checkoff investment in beef quality assurance helps create profit opportunities for your farm or ranch, visit www.mybeefcheckoff.com/BQA.
Welcome back to AgriTalk Online at World Dairy Expo in Madison, Wisconsin. From the Cattlemen's Beef Board exhibit, we have with us on our panel today Dr. Dave Rhoda, retired veterinarian of 37 years who works with the Dairy Science Short Course Program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Also with us is Randy Geiger, a dairy producer from Reedsville, Wisconsin, and a member of the Cattlemen's Beef Board, and Dr. Tom Strauss, veterinarian and a member of the Wisconsin Veterinary Board and a producer himself. So we have a lot to talk about. We've touched on a lot of topics already, but I want to get into this antibiotic issue because it's been in the news so much lately. We have the network news special on CBS. I got a lot of people thinking about this. Since then, others have made these claims of health problems because of the antibiotics used in livestock production and being in the meat. So, Dave, I want to start with you. It seems like we are a society that people themselves don't ever hesitate to take antibiotics. We count on them and rely upon them over and over, but yet for some there seems to be a feeling those should not be used in animals. I don't quite understand that, but how do we assure our consumers that antibiotic use is done properly and done for a good reason?
Well, I think the concern is twofold. Number one, that we do not allow any residues to get into our meat supply. And number two is that we do not create resistance in the bacteria that we normally treat with it. So that's where the concern comes from the consuming public. The way we would deal with that, or the way we do deal with that with our animals, is basically we use them for the therapy when they need to be used. And so as a veterinarian, we have quite a tiering of organized veterinarians who put together the programs for us. The name of it is the judicious use of antibiotics. And so from the standpoint of the dairy industries, one of our issues is that the dairy industry is a very diverse group, meaning that these kind of programs actually have to be put together a farm at a time to meet the customized use of that farm. Requires a veterinarian and the dairyman working together, just like Randy talked about in his situation, so that we plan when we should use these antibiotics, use them for as short as we can, for as long as we need to, in a narrow spectrum. So we have the tools in place, and we do use them currently.
Are we, as some suggest, creating this super bug out there that it's resistant to antibiotics, and we're creating some problem that we're not going to be able to deal with down the line?
I don't think so. And I say that because we have a lot of watchdogs who are watching to make sure that that happens. From the standpoint of organized veterinarians, one of the things that we want to make sure is that the decisions on regulating the use of drugs and this sort of thing are based on science, based on logic, not based on emotion. So we always have people who have fears that are not founded. And so as an organized group, we want to use science, we want to use records to know what is being used, and make sure that we have a responsible person on each farm who manages this.
Tom, if you just listen to some of the reports that are out there, people would come away with the impression that a dairy producer or a beef producer just willy-nilly pumping these antibiotics into animals without any oversight or any any guidelines or restrictions, and really that's not the case at all, is it?
No, it's not. On a lot of these farms that I was going to touch on is we have protocols in place, and with these protocols we have appropriate therapeutic drugs that we use when we have a correct diagnosis of disease, and with that, in the protocol we have the route of administration and the appropriate dose given to each animal. And then we also like to keep a record. Not only is the cow visually marked, but also a written record is kept on file. And it should be the same person that makes those treatment decisions is also the one deciding who makes the culling decisions. So there is no breakdown in communication from the time that the animal is treated to the time that she is sent to harvest.
I've even heard it said that antibiotic use in animals gets more scrutiny and oversight than antibiotic use in humans.
I believe that is true. We have children of our own, and when they are given a prescription for antibiotics, it's more for like 3 weeks, and there's really not a lot of questions asked. And with farmers, I ask a lot of questions before I just dole out a drug to be used. We want to make sure that we have a proper diagnosis and it's an appropriate drug for the treatment, and we want to make sure we have enough time on therapy to cause a response, but we also don't want them to be on an extended period of times to cause resistance of bacteria to those antibiotics.
Now, we've heard about how Denmark and other places have gone away from antibiotic use, and that's the model we should follow in this country. How do you respond to that?
Well, touching a little bit on what Dave said earlier, I feel there is also an animal welfare issue on this, too. By not allowing treatment of animals with drugs, it actually, I feel, is more harmful to the animal than giving appropriate treatment. If you look at studies that they talk about use of drugs in Denmark, they've gone away from using less preventative drugs, but they use a lot more in treatment thereafter. And it's actually more usage of drugs now in those countries than before.
What about these stories of people getting sick from eating meat that they say is because the animals had antibiotics in them, and then somehow that's transferred as an illness onto people consuming meat? Is there anything to that? What do we know about that?
Well, that might be a little bit out of my area of expertise, but I don't think, if you look at the bacteria that causes those disease processes in those people, a lot of times it's not related to the bugs that are on the farm, that they come back and when they identify them and strain them out and genetically look at the fingerprint of them, they're not exactly the same bugs.
Dave, that's why we have the withdrawal period, right?
That's correct. We have withdrawal times on both meat and milk. And we have a law that's called the Animal Medical Drug Usage Clarification Act, which regulates extra label drug use and puts it in the responsibility of a veterinarian. With our labeling laws, the label, it's not possible for every condition, every scenario to be met by the label. So we have a very sound law that regulates when and how we can step beyond the label of the drug.
Okay, Randy, let me talk to you as a producer. You can't speak for all producers, but I want to use you as an example. On your operation, how do you manage the use of antibiotics?
As a last resort, totally. The most stressful time for an animal, a cow, is when she freshens, and we like to give her an overdose, if you call it, of calcium, extra vitamins, and warm water when the calf is born. And we monitor for the first 10 days to 2 weeks. We monitor everyone very closely, because that's the most stress, especially for like a slight case of ketosis and that. And if we can keep those problems to a low level, you hardly need, because antibiotic, ask our veterinarian, we use very few antibiotics on our farm. And one case of food safety is that before any fluid milk goes into the system, the truck is tested for antibiotics, and if it's positive, it's discarded as a waste. So there's no antibiotics in milk goes into the system.
And of course, the other thing I always point to, let's use the dairy industry as an example. With the way dairy prices have been, and as tough as it's been, what dairy producer is going to spend money they don't have to spend? It just doesn't make economic sense to think you're just out there just pumping something into an animal that you don't have to.
No, by no means. It's as you said, it's an extra cost, and you don't know where it's going to lead. So you stay away from that.
Tom, I want to come back to you. This is a point I keep making. It seems to me the animals, as well as we as consumers, would be in greater risk without the use of antibiotics in our livestock production.
Yes, I think, as Randy was saying, we try to do as many things preventatively as we can. A sound nutrition program, good husbandry practices, but there is a few occasional times when even that isn't enough and then we have to use antibiotics. But we have a lot of protocols in place and standard operating procedures that we follow, along with record keeping, that keeps the food chain safe from antibiotic residues. And fortunately, these animals get the benefit of the use of antibiotics to then sustain a better quality of life and be a more integral part of a production chain. Whereas in humans, the same way, I'd like to have access to antibiotics if I got sick also. So I think we need to consider that as long as we do it safely, we have testing programs in place to monitor these animals and to make sure that they're withheld a proper, correct time period, that we should be able to use it under the discretion of a veterinarian.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get back to the quality assurance programs, both dairy and beef quality assurance programs. More information there on how you can be certified. You can even do it online. We have more information to share with you on that. Stay with us as we continue with our panel discussion from here at World Dairy Expo at AgriTalk Online.